Okay, so if you enjoyed that, here's another piece from another little piece of writing from American Standard. Here we've got the psychopathology of U.S. history. We've got the first and second Iraq wars, quote unquote, which is really just invasion bombing campaigns of those countries. Unfortunately, what's going on right now in Iran. But we're going to continue onward with a little bit more of this happy doodle piece here. Okay, those are two struggling for the soul of the innocent there. That's a William Blake illustration. Power has to be wrested from the grasp of the tyrants everywhere. The corporate lackeys to militarism, the stooges of industry who are slaves to the funding of the Pentagon budget, which is really only our tax money. The money for so-called high-tech industry research and development come from out of the pockets of the workers, whether we admit it or even are aware of it at all. The tax money we work for pays for the military invasions of other countries. That is why we are all truly guilty. No one who works and pays taxes is exempt from their complicity in the murders. The blood may be invisible, but it's all over our hands, and it's covering the dollar. Anyone who pays taxes to Uncle Sam is just another prostitute pimping for the man. They get their cut from the sweat of your brow. The dull ache in the small of your lower back provides them with the means to further their tendrils of control over every aspect of your life. They own the media. They control the flow of information. They dictate the terms of the debate. Thus, they win every time. Even the most persuasive rebel is an empty fashion plate if he's unwilling to tear the whole thing down and set about rebuilding a fairer, more decent, humane system that places people's needs for basic necessities before the capacity for profit and amassing obscene capital. Anyone with a stake in the system invariably defends the system. If you honestly think that all we need is to spruce up our decrepit system with a few cosmetic surface-level changes, more diversity, let's say, instead of an all-out redistribution of wealth from the top of the pyramid right down to the very bottom on a worldwide scale, then you are just another shill at the service of your masters, parroting the company line, helping to prop up the phony left-right dichotomy that controls the public mind. Liberals the good cop, conservative the bad one. They both report to the rich, and they both spend most of their time locking up the poor for one or another crime against property. They have a solid stake in maintaining the unequal distribution of wealth, and neither one stands to gain anything by rejecting it completely, while the workers all have everything to gain and very little to lose. They are forever making excuses for the many abuses of power in all of its forms, and make themselves busy propping up a broken symbol, forever lying or inventing distractions to keep you occupied, pursuing minute, endless, meaningless details. But the systems of indoctrination are so effective, you have a whole class of people who simply cannot recognize they have nothing. And they are taught from a very early age to hold on to that little that they have with all of their might in case anybody tries to take it away. Besides, most people are so delusional from years of brainwashing, they believe all they need is one lucky break, and one day they, too, are going to be rich. They plan on one day being king of the mountain. So why should they grumble about all they haven't got and what they're forced to do every day just to be allowed to survive? The purpose of politics is to teach the bull to chase after the toreador's red cape while he sticks him from the side again and again with his knife, over and over till he lies down and dies. That's how the elite deals with the public. Accordingly, the purpose of this writing is to help the bull get a bead on the source of his torment, get him clearly in his sights, charge him and gore him and stomp him into the ground. The bull, the working poor, have nothing to gain by voting for candidates groomed and plucked by the upper class for our amusing charades in the daily funny papers. They are selected by the wealthy elite, bred to best feed us. Bred to best feed us the phony spectacle of pompous patriotic bombast, forever trying to outdo each other, theatrically beating their breasts in wanton displays of falsehood that make any honest person dizzy with nausea. All governments are run by liars, and nothing that they say should be believed. That goes double for all the heads of corporations. That goes triple for all the mass media owners, editors, and so-called reporters, none of whom afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted, which is supposed to be their job. We live in a world of well-heeled liars, twisting the truth to make life easier for themselves, and their outright betrayal of all that is most decent in the human character, covering their crimes with a veneer of undeserved respectability. We are surrounded by soulless functionaries everywhere who exist only to legitimize and defend what should be rent asunder and ripped to shreds. In the modern dynamic of ain't predatory capitalism grand, power is always justified, privilege is always protected, moderation and open-mindedness is forever cautioned by those whose job it is to lie to you to keep you obedient servants, held in place by the arbitrary demands of normalcy, force-fed the destructive notion of the terrible necessity for maintaining the status quo. The establishment left exists to tell you how far it's okay to go in their feeble critiques without actually accomplishing anything. It's all fine and good to talk about how terrible the government is. Just don't try and overthrow it. It's okay to write all about how unfair and unjust law is and how it really ought to be changed, but don't disobey it or face the consequences when you get caught. They teach us that civil disobedience is all about consenting to be arrested and beaten. Never mind attempting to resist the forces of property and protectors of privilege known as the police department by turning on the cops and pepper spraying them for a change. That would be anarchy, not a rough kind of justice. If you're going to spend your life sticking up for the wealthy elite, you really ought to get your own ass kicked instead of dishing it out every time. It's all going to the carefully laid plans of it's all going according to the carefully laid plans of the upper crust who own the wealth of the world and get their kicks playing with poor people's lives. The notion of Americans not having to be slaves to survive and being able to truly own their own souls has been done away with by the necessity of survival and the nature of what constitutes, quote, success in the corporate realm. All of our lives are a big social engineering experiment for them, providing safe and acceptable means of ineffective, futile rebellion. Continuing onward here. Okay. Let's get this to focus here. Okay. They spend their lives ferreting out anyone with the least bit of integrity and set about trying to buy them off, diverting any genuine anger and energy into acceptable pastimes like entertainment, fashion, and phony rebellion. That's why you can't let anyone speak for you. Not the right, not the left, not the imaginary center. Get the hell out of that bogus dialectic and see the world in terms of the powerful and the powerless. Those with money, property, influence, and stature, and those who are worker bees struggling for each day's daily bread and paycheck, one paycheck away from living out on the street. The point of attempting to live as free as possible, free as possible given the constraints of the system, will only be achieved by breaking out of the shackles of our years of conditioning. Until we recognize how totally brainwashed we are, there's no hope of breaking free from those chains of mental oppression. As members of the economic underclass, we are conditioned all of our lives into patterns of behavior and consumption that are not in our best interests. We are the working poor, and we cannot spend the byproduct of our hard-earned labors on more junk inessential to our existence. When you live paycheck to paycheck with little hope for economic advancement, and you aren't busily profiting off exploiting someone else's insecurity by working in marketing or advertising, you have little hope of surviving with dignity. The majority of our society consists of decent, tolerant, incredibly patient people trying hard not to live lives of quiet desperation by commiserating and sharing their burdens in the hopes of lightening the load at the very least. Why should we be driven to such a state when the entire earth, by right of birth, belongs to all of us to share, not to a few wealthy families? The rich and well-born control so much they allow us to exist only in so much as we serve their wishes, so they can harness their plows to our backs and ride. When we suit their purposes and agree to play the game of getting ahead at the expense of our fellow workers, when we have become the rats in their maze, as I said, life in modern America, for the majority of us, is to exist within the midst of a giant social engineering experiment. Just how badly can they treat us, and what can they turn us all into? How desperate can they make us so that we claw and scrape over the bodies of those in front of us, climbing over them to make it into the upper rungs of the ladder of, quote, suckcyst. SUCKCYST. We are all being observed constantly and judged and laughed at by those who consider themselves our social betters. If you agree to be of use to them, you can gain your acceptance and consent to being used by them to increase their own level of prosperity, and they will allow you a somewhat privileged existence as a lapdog at their feet. As I said, mainly helping to protect their artificial level of separation from the rest of us. You can then try to reach their level and become one of them, or think you are, but you never will be. The conditions of your upbringing, the poverty and want, will forever mark you as an outsider, a usurper, a pretender. You will always fail miserably when you try to play by their rules and attempt to beat them at their own game, which is totally rigged. The person you became in your effort to get there up top with the winners in the loft destroys all you were in the first place. You traded all that you once were for who you became. Sure, you got that mansion on the hill, but along the way, you traded in all of your best qualities to get ahead. Your empathy, your understanding, your mercy, pity, and peace, and most of all, your inherent basic decency. All had to be excised and put up on the shelf until you got what you thought you wanted. Then when you went there to find them again, they were all gone. There's truly no place to spit in a rich man's house but in his face. Crude class hatred, perhaps, but richly deserved. We need to insist on an all-out class war on all fronts. It's been going on all along from the top down anyway. When are the victims going to turn on the perpetrators and fight back? Awareness of this has to come from knowing who you are and where you come from. What you really got to lose versus what they got. You can't ever lose sight of your goals entirely and start accepting the dominant assumptions such as, quote, clothes make the man, quote, and appearances are reality, when you know damn well you only have such a limited wardrobe because you're at the mercy of hard economic realities that the rich don't have to worry about. Wearing the same pair of floppy, ragged shoes for months because you need to eat. So you don't ever judge a book by its cover, and you just say no to the surface-level accoutrements of style and hipness, whereby we all worship the altar of what is declared fashionable in our time period, since it's always just an extension of shallow, bogus values of a fascist culture, such as youth, physical beauty, and cruelty, all valued in themselves as signs of, quote, strength, when it's really an ill omen of much worse tendencies. In contrast to these so-called values, we need to assert that the poor, the old, and the ugly all have a right to live and be treated decently, too. Oftentimes, they have much more wisdom from the hard-learned experience of being treated as a person by shallow idiots who really ought to know better. Tough guys who live empty lives of conformity to some masculine stereotype of how it's the manly thing to do to be brutal and thoughtless in pursuit of your goals. It's no wonder the murder that goes on every day, fueled by greed, is allowed to continue when people only treat others insofar as they can be of some use to them. That's adopting the mentality of the rulers. You too can make it, they say. Just don't let anyone stand in your way. And if they do, knock them over and kick them when they're down for good measure. That'll teach them to know their place. Look out, world. Here comes a winner. Someone who's so focused on pulling down that brass ring dangled like a carrot by the master above his head, he'll do anything to get it. All you got to do to be our next big success story is sell your soul.